Hey everyone, it's EJ from Eyedesyn.com, and today I'm going to be showing you my workflow for how to create this nice morphing animation. So I have three objects morphing into one another. It's kind of an evolution of cameras from this old-timey camera to a more modern camera and morphing into an iPhone that you can take selfies and pictures of your food with. So I'm going to show you how I did this morphing effect. And just to give you an idea of how cool this workflow is, to do this entire animation, to do all these moves, took about maybe 10 keyframes, something like that. So it's all these objects morphing between these three states, 10 keyframes. So come on down. I'm going to show you how to do this. So you can see that all of these shapes were basically made after or created from these cylinders and these cubes, all parametric. And it takes a little bit of planning when you're thinking about what kind of objects you want to morph between. You want to make sure you have all of the elements for each of your objects. So you can see in that animation that I just showed that I'm reusing a lot of the same elements. And in some of them, like a couple of the objects go away, but for the most part, all of these objects are used to create some piece of each of these objects. So let me show you how I did that. And I'm going to use something that is usually synonymous with character animation, and that is the Pose Morph Tag. So usually people morph between like character poses and stuff like that, but it's used for, you can use it for a heck of a lot more than that. And I'm going to show you how you can do it with just normal traditional keyframing of just normal objects, such as cubes and cylinders. So you can see in our pose morph options here, we have all these parameters we can kind of morph or mix between. So we got position, scale, rotation, parameters, and user data, weight maps, stuff like that, UV, all this good stuff. So what we're going to need to morph between to morph all these objects is we want to make sure we have we want to move the position. So we want to morph between positions. You'll see that I automatically, when I did that, it put me to this tag field, and I'm just going to tab back to basic. Kind of when you choose something, it automatically takes you there. So just move back to the basic tab. You can continue making more or enabling more of these options. So I also want to enable scale. I don't think I'm going to use rotation, but I'm going to use parameters. Now, what parameters are is in parametric objects, it's all of these. So all of these parameters that are native to all these parametric objects are going to be stored as well. So that's super important. So I'm going to enable that. So not only are we storing just the coordinate position scale, but we're also storing the radius, height, and all these cap options. So you can actually morph between all those options. So I also have this hierarchy, and it's important because I'm just applying this pose morph tag to a null. So to be able to tell this tag, hey, look at all the objects underneath in this hierarchy, I need to make sure I check that hierarchy option on as well. So right away you'll notice that if I have this base pose, that's going to be just this pose right here. And it automatically creates your first pose you're going to morph into already. So let me rename this base pose to just old-timey camera. And this pose is just going to be the more modern camera. And if I go back to my picture viewer, we're going to morph into this shape first. So let's go ahead and create our more modern camera. And I'm going to go into my top, front, and right views and just start moving stuff around and reshaping some of these rectangles and stuff like that, or cubes. So I'm going to just kind of move my little green bit here and rescale that. And I'm just pulling the handles on the XYZ are the parameters. So remember, we have parameters storing on our pose morph, so it's also storing all the parameters right here on all of our parametrics. So move this down here, and this is going to be like this little blue bit is going to be like a little accent piece on the bottom. Let's see there. And then this is going to be let me just move this here so I can show you exactly what I'm working towards here. There we go. So I need to make this yellow bit a little bit longer and a little bit fatter in the Z. So you can see that I'm moving the position, I'm adjusting the parameters of all of these objects. So all of this adjustment is going to be stored in that Pose Morph tag there. So it's very important that before you even start, you make sure you're setting all of those things that you'll need to record. So I can even go in if I want to and adjust the fillet radius and stuff like that, and that'll also be stored also. So I can bring the fillet radius on that down too. And now I can go and reuse this little flash bit from the old-timey camera, and this will now become our shutter on our more modern camera. Like so. And this flash will become the new modern camera kind of flash. Now for this last one, this other little button lens thing, this will be like the little, you know, that little red button that gets rid of red eye on cameras. So that's gonna, these cylinders will become that. So I'm gonna select both these cylinders, and instead of going into their parameters, I'm just gonna scale this down. But one important thing to note is that this will not record if you're just in model mode. You need to go to object mode and actually change the parameters of these scale bits, and you'll only change the scale in your coordinates of your objects when you're in object mode. So you can see that if I'm scaling this down and I go back into my parameters, you can see that it was like 0.9, now it's down to 0.5. So that's going to be stored because I have scale being stored on my Pose Morph. So that's just another way to kind of adjust these objects instead of going through their the cylinder radius and all that stuff. So there we go, we got that looking pretty good. Cool, so this will be our first shape, or second shape actually. And let me just make this lens a little bit bigger and push this back. And there we go, that's looking pretty close to how I had it down here. So this will be our second pose. Now, if we did this correctly, I should be able to adjust the strength of this pose, and I should be able to go right back to my old-timey camera. So looking good. So I'm going to stay in my edit mode, and I'm going to add a new pose. And you'll see that when I add a new pose, it's going to add it based on my original base pose here. And I don't want to do that. I want to actually delete this, and I want to create a third pose based on this more modern camera. So I'm going to go, and if I hit Command and click Add Pose, that'll actually create a new pose based on that modern camera. So Command or Control on a Windows, and do the add pose, and that'll create a pose based on whichever pose you have selected at that time. So I'm going to rename this iPhone, and I'll skip ahead to my iPhone here so you can see what I'll be building towards. And so we can just start moving all these objects around to create an iPhone. All right, so make sure you have your iPhone pose selected, and we're gonna just start moving this stuff around. So these two objects, you can see I don't have these cylinders as part of the iPhone, so I'm just gonna go and don't need these, so I'm just gonna bring the radius down to 0, and maybe just move them back a little bit and give it a height of 0 as well. So those two cylinders are gone. They're not going to be used for this little bit. Let's see. I don't believe I use this cube as well. So I'm just going to scale these suckers down also. And let's see. I'm going to then just start making the iPhone. So I'm going to scale up and position this green element, this green cube here. So this is going to be like the main chunk of our iPhone. And then this yellow part is going to be our screen. So there we go. And then this blue bit is going to be the nice little outline of our screen, just to give it a little bit more color. Like so. And we can even make this a little bit taller. And then we're going to use these two cylinders that are remaining, and we're just going to grab them and bring them down to the bottom here. And these are going to be, move this back slightly. This is going to be the blue bit here. And I'm just going to scale these cylinders up. And we're still in object mode here, so we're all set. That should be recorded. And then I'm going to go, and I got this little flash piece here. I'm just going to move this up here. This is going to be the little speaker part of the iPhone that you'll hold up to your ear. And make this a little bit bigger, and there we go. It's looking good. So now we have our iPhone bit. So let's go ahead and make sure that this transforms back into the old-timey camera. Okay, cool. So what we can do now is just kind of check between all three of these. If we need to make any final changes or edit anything, we can just select each of these and just kind of adjust if we need to. But I think we're looking pretty good at this point. Let's maybe move these down a bit. But for the most part, if you need to make any changes after your initial morphs, you just click on this, and its default is edit selected, and you can just go in, make your changes. If I select the iPhone pose, it'll take me to the iPhone here. So everything's looking good. Maybe move this over a bit. Cool. So now to actually start morphing between all these. So we're going to go from edit mode to animate. And you'll see right away that we have some blocky crap that doesn't look like anything. And that's because we have all of the 100% on both our modern camera pose and our iPhone pose. So it's kind of mixing both of those poses together. Now, if I just bring down the modern camera slider to 0, you'll see, okay, that's 100% iPhone pose happening, and we're seeing our iPhone pose. But if I bring down the iPhone pose to 0 and the modern camera down to 0, we're going to our base pose. Now if I bring my modern camera up while my iPhone pose is 0%, we just morph to our modern camera pose. So now we can actually start animating between all of these. So I'm going to bring my timeline up here. I'm going to go full screen. So actually one thing I notice right away is if I go back to my edit mode, you can see that when the pose goes to the modern camera, the camera is not centered in my scene. So what I want to do is, with this edit mode still selected, I'm just going to go and bring this whole entire group up and kind of center that in the scene. So all the objects are kind of centered in my little composition. So now we can go back to animate, and you can see that now the camera is more centered in the scene, isn't kind of aligned to the bottom. Cool. So everything's looking good. So let's go ahead and let's animate. So what we're going to do is go ahead and I'm going to create, let's see, let's go to frame, let's say 10, and I'm going to create a keyframe by clicking on this record dot by the modern camera, and I'm going to, at frame 25, I'm going to morph 100% to that camera pose and hit another keyframe. So there we go. Right there. There is my pose morph modern camera strength right there. I'm going to go back to my camera, or my pose morph tag here, and I'm going to wait about another 10 keyframes. I'm going to create another keyframe for that modern camera pose, and I'm going to set a keyframe for my iPhone. So I'm going to go ahead about 15 frames to frame 50, and I'm going to bring down my modern camera pose to 0, and I'm going to bring my iPhone pose up to 100%. So I'm getting rid of the modern camera pose, and I'm just going to bring up my iPhone pose. So now if I go, you can see that, okay, we're morphing from the camera to the iPhone. Perfect. So now we're actually, for the end of the animation, we're going to go from the iPhone pose back to the old-timey camera, so we can make like an animated GIF of this, which is what I ultimately did at the end of this little project. So I'm going to go ahead, and there's my iPhone strength curve, keyframe curve here, and I'm going to go and I'm going to have this pose hold for about 10 frames, hit another keyframe, and then at about 75 frames I'm going to bring my iPhone pose down to 0. So now if I hit play, we have this awesome morphing happening, and we can adjust this so it's the composition's a little bit shorter. So let's see, let's just have this whole animation end at frame 75, hit play, and we can even speed everything way up by just selecting all of our keyframes and just kind of condensing everything in here. So maybe the entire animation is only 60 frames long, and then we can start getting into our curves here. And right by itself with just default keyframes, it looks kind of boring. So let's start messing with these curves and give them a little bit of overshoot. So you can see how it have this really nice bounce here. So what you can do is actually go beyond 100%, and you can see that our pose beyond 100% has this little like bounce. So we can actually keyframe that in our pose strengths to give it this really nice bounce here. So you'll notice right here that my rectangle disappears, and this is something just weird that I found out by doing this project, and I found that the reason why it does this is because our fillet radius is too high. It's really weird, But let's just go and fix that. So again, our rectangle kind of disappears right about there. So let's go and fix that. So I'm on my modern camera thing here, or modern camera pose, and I'm going to do in place and make sure that we have 100%. And I'm just going to adjust this fillet to like just 1. And let's see if that fixes it. Like I said, it's a really weird thing how it disappears like that, and I've found that it's because of that rounding or the fillet. So that looks like that fixed it. So that's just something to keep in mind. Just a little weird bug with the fillets on rectangles. No, that's confusing. It's just a weird bug, but that's how you get around it. And cool. So now we can continue to just make these keyframes have this nice little bounce in the strength by just kind of overshooting. You can see that I have this nice bounce, or my strength goes above 100% right here, and we have this nice. So you really can't see the bounce there, so let's just give it a little bit more. You can see that if the bounce is, or the strength is too high above 100%, our cylinders here kind of shoot out, which isn't really what we want. But so we got to be kind of careful with that. That looks pretty good. And to get the same kind of thing for these keyframes, you can see that, you know, if I do this, it's going to mess up my curve to the left. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to go to this keyframe as well. I'm going to get rid of the auto tangents. I'm going to get rid of the clamp, and I'm going to break those tangents by going and clicking on that break tangent. So now I'll be able to independently move this handle from this handle right here. I need to make sure that this handle is flat. And what I'm going to do is do the reverse of this curve and have it go a little bit below 0% on that curve. So just like you can go above 100% and go even further than that 100% pose, you can actually go below 0% in a pose as well. And let's do this for the iPhone strength pose, and let's see how that looks. So we have the nice bouncing in and out of our poses by adjusting our curves to go below 0% and also above 100% of each pose. And that's basically it. We have this nice morphing between our old-timey camera, our modern camera, and our iPhone, and it's reusing all of these same parametric objects, cylinders and cubes. And like I said, this took, let's see, how many keyframes do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Actually 6. I was an idiot. Those aren't, well, actually no. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so 8. We have 8 keyframes controlling this entire animation, all being driven by adjusting all of our Pose Morph Tag morphs, and everything's looking pretty good. So again, if you need to make a change from this, in place means you can actually adjust as it's in its place right here, and it doesn't matter which you're selecting right now. But if you go to selected, you actually go to whatever pose you select, and you'll see that this isn't working as it did before, and that's because we have things animated. So to actually see these selected poses again, we need to just bring that strength up, and then we can start doing editing again, and then the iPhone as well. So keep that in mind when you actually need to go back after you animate these poses and you want to make changes to the poses. These will just reset these will be driven by the strengths. So if I go to animate and I need to edit stuff again, you'll see that, okay, we got the phone and we can't get the modern camera. That's because the strength is keyframed to 0. If we want to edit that modern camera, just bring the strength to 100, and I can start, moving stuff around. So that is basically it. Then we just jump back into our animate and just hit play, and there we go. So to really sell the effect, again, you need to pre-plan what objects you're going to be using for each of your shapes, or camera shapes, objects, whatever you're going to be making, and then having this nice bounce really it adds a really cool organic look to it as well. Really gives everything this nice smooth animation, and that is just by adjusting our keyframe curves and going a little bit above 100% of the morph and below the morph as well. So that is morphing between shapes and objects in Cinema 4D with the Pose Morphs.